What's up YouTube? So I just thought I'd preface the video you're about to watch by just explaining that other than the introduction at the start of this video, there'll be a time lapse for about 2 or 3 minutes of just putting on this these large sections of wall, which in reality to some is pretty boring. So if you want to just skip to sort of halfway through where the tips and the tricks are, by all means. Also, I just wanted to say thank you to all those that have subscribed. We've had several new subscribers this week, so thank you so much for your support. And for those that are asking us to make videos who have questions and what have you, we are slowly getting around to those videos. But for anyone who has any questions with regards to plastering, by all means, put it in the comments or send us a message and we will get round to making those videos and hopefully answering the questions that you have. But thanks again for the support and we hope you enjoy the video. What's up YouTube? So today the question is, how do you plaster really large walls or massive sets? The question you might be wondering is, well, what then do you classify as a really large wall? Well, the ones we're on today look a little bit like this. To give you an idea of just how high these walls are, bear in mind I am 6'2". These are some very tall walls. In fact, they are about 5.5 meters high. We're plastering an art gallery for Brighton University. As you can see, we've already done the 2 end walls, but this is what we've got to plaster. So the question is, how are we going to do it? How do you hit walls of this size? Well, unsurprisingly, because they're so large, we will be going through it a little bit quick today. So what we're actually going to do is we're just going to time lapse us putting the walls on, and then towards the end of the video what we'll actually do is explain the techniques that we've used to be able to plaster walls of this size. We hope you like the video, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Okay, so just to explain the process that we decided to use for tackling these walls, you'll notice that Louis is plastering the lower section while I am on the scissor lift. The reason for this being, other than the fact that the space was a bit tight, but also there is a weight requirement or weight restriction on the lift. So having 2.5 bags in the bucket I was using, as well as having Louis and myself, would have far outweighed or exceeded the weight limit. So as such, only one of us could be on there at a time. So instead, Louis is doing as far as he can reach lower down while I do the top half, and then we just swap over walls. When it came to the second coat, because the walls obviously are wetter because they've already got plaster on, Louis didn't need to put anything on. You might have noticed in a second that I'm going over Louis' wall again. There's no other reason for this than we had a little bit of extra plaster and he put it on quite tight, so I was using up a bit of the gear. But you'll also notice in the clip that's about to change that we go round the square first. We did this on the other section of wall as well. The reason being is just the white sections are sticking out a little bit too far on the plasterboard, so we're just building that area up first and then plastering the rest of the wall. We did obviously go through all of the trowel process while we were on the walls and what have you, so those 2 sections are now finished, but it's pretty boring to watch on time lapse and you don't really see anything extra. So these videos are just us, these time lapses are us just putting on the wall.
You will also notice at this point that a third individual makes an appearance. This is actually the person running the project, the person working in the art gallery. He just wanted to have a go at plastering himself. Needless to say, I don't think at this point he probably could make any money out of it, but it was nice just to show him a few techniques so he could have a go. Fortunately, it didn't affect the overall finish. So just looking at the final part of the time lapse, you can see here more of a point of view shot of working on the scissor lift. Straight away you can see there's not an awful lot of space. You certainly wouldn't want two people on here, not with a bucket with 2.5 bags worth of plaster in it as well. It's a bit of a pain in the neck. Not only that, plastering behind the rail as well, not particularly ideal, but unfortunately it's a necessary evil to be able to get the access this high up. But in the grand scheme of things, the scissor lift worked quite well, and we certainly would use this method again for plastering walls this high. So tip number 1 is to make sure that all of the prep work is done ahead of time. So you've got all of your scrim taping done, all the water is in the room ready to go, all the bags of plaster are here, so you're not going backwards and forwards, because once you start plastering a really large wall, the last thing you want to do is to have to go elsewhere because you forgot something. So most important, get your prep work done first. Secondly, when knocking up plaster or mixing up plaster, knock it up as close to the work area as possible. So in the cases of these high walls that we've been doing, one half, so we've been using 2 buckets, and one of those buckets is actually being knocked up on the scissor lift, and then the other bucket of plaster is being knocked up on the bottom half of the wall. But knock up your plaster as close as possible to your work area without it getting in the way. Thirdly, so tip number 3 is to have a plan for how you're going to tackle the wall. Because of the walls that we were doing, you can see here, these are very large walls. They are some 5.5 meters high, and I think the entire span is something like 16 meters long. It is a very large area. So have a plan for how you're going to tackle the wall and then stick to it. Tip number 4, to go through your process of plastering, move methodically. Don't be silly and waste your time going backwards and forwards over stuff you've already done. To go smooth, slow, take your time, but really think about what you're doing so that you're not wasting energy or wasting time applying plaster. Tip number 5, and this is very, very important, especially when doing walls like what we're doing here where they're exceptionally high, is to flatten as you go. So once we've done a section across the width of the wall, we then flatten what we've done, drop down a level, and then go along. The reason being, with walls this high and this long, by the time you've got it all on and then you come back to it, it's pulled into such a degree that flattening it is very difficult. So flatten as you go. Tip number 6 is to knock up or mix up a little bit more plaster than you normally need. Now the easiest way to work out how many bags you need is just to work out the meterage. So normally multi-finish or board finish, which we're doing here, does between 8 to 10 meters squared to 1 bag. So just work out the meterage and work out around about that. So it depends on how thick you're obviously putting it on as to how far that goes, but just to mix up a little bit extra. The reason being, the last thing you want is to be on the other side of that where you don't have enough plaster. And when you're really up against it and you have to knock up more plaster, that is an absolute nightmare. Tip number 7, and this is particularly for extremely high walls. Now you'll see in the video that we're using the spatula or the speed skim, we're going sideways. On really tall walls, this is the only time we ever spat sideways, as in only sideways. And there is a good reason for it. Because when we're plastering up and down, we're overlapping where we've been. You're getting a build-up where the 2 sections of plaster are meeting. So you want to spat sideways at all times to take off that build-up. Otherwise, what will happen is if you spat up and down, is you will get lumps in your wall where those 2 overlaps were. So on really high walls, just spat sideways. And then the final tip number 8 for plastering extremely large walls or really large sets, is to consider using extra time. It's a product which basically delays how long the plaster goes off. So I think it's 2 sachets per bag of plaster. We don't want to use it here because at the end of the day we're working for the University of Brighton and we still need to be finished between 5 and 6 o'clock. So if we were to use too much extra time, we'd be here for ages. And I suppose a bonus tip as well, when tackling really large walls, is to know your limits. If it's considerably beyond what your abilities are, consider taping a joint and then feathering it in afterwards. It's far better than hitting walls which are way above your skill level and then you end up ruining what you've done. So know your limits.